The sound of wagon wheels grinding against the dusty trail echoed through the valley as Fiona James clutched her children close, her heart pounding with equal measures of hope and trepidation. The year was 1875, and the California sun beat down mercilessly upon their tired bodies as they approached Calico, the mining town that would soon become their home, or perhaps just another disappointment in a long string of hardships she'd endured since her husband's passing 2 years prior. "Mama, are we almost there?" 7-year-old Sarah tugged at Fiona's sleeve, her wide eyes reflecting the apprehension that had haunted them since leaving St. Louis. "Yes, my darling." Fiona smoothed her daughter's auburn curls so like her own. "Just a little while longer." 5-year-old Thomas, his small frame pressed against her side, remained silent but vigilant, his gaze fixed on the approaching town. He hadn't spoken much since his father's death, a worry that constantly gnawed at Fiona's heart. The driver, a gruff man with leathery skin who had introduced himself only as Jenkins, called back over his shoulder, "Calico's just round this bend, madam. Your new husband's ranch is about 3 miles outside town." Husband. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Matthew Daniels was merely a name on paper, a man who had advertised for a wife in the matrimonial news, seeking companionship and help running his cattle ranch. Fiona had responded out of desperation, exchanging a handful of letters before agreeing to this arrangement. What she hadn't mentioned in those letters was the existence of her children, a deception that now weighed on her conscience like a stone. As the wagon crested the final hill, Calico spread before them a collection of wooden buildings scattered along a main street, nestled against the reddish mountains that gave the town its name. Mining operations dotted the hillsides, and even from this distance, Fiona could see the bustle of activity. "It's bigger than I thought," she murmured, adjusting the worn bonnet that offered little protection from the unrelenting sun. "Boom town, madam," Jenkins nodded. "Silver's bringing folks from all over. Your mister, though, he's been here longer than most, came for gold and stayed for cattle." The wagon continued its descent toward Calico, dust billowing behind them. Fiona rehearsed her explanation in her mind for the 100th time. Perhaps Matthew Daniels would be understanding about the children. Perhaps he would send them away immediately. Either way, she had exactly $8 to her name and nowhere else to go. Jenkins pulled the wagon to a stop outside the general store. Mr. Daniels said to meet him here. He had business in town today. Fiona nodded, gathering her courage as she helped her children down from the wagon. They stood huddled together, 3 travel-worn figures surrounded by their meager possessions, one trunk containing all that remained of their former life. "Stay close," she whispered to the children, straightening Thomas's collar and brushing dust from Sarah's dress. The store's door swung open, and a tall figure emerged, shading his eyes against the sun as he surveyed the street. Even from a distance, Fiona could see he was a striking man, broad-shouldered and straight-backed, his face partially obscured by a well-kept beard. When his gaze fell upon them, he paused, then strode purposefully in their direction. "Miss James," he called, his voice deep but not unkind. "Mr. Daniels." Fiona's mouth went dry as she managed a curtsy. I'm Fiona James." He stopped several paces from them, his eyes moving from her face to the children clinging to her skirts. Something unreadable crossed his features. Surprise, certainly, but Fiona couldn't discern if anger lurked beneath. "These are my children," she blurted out, unable to bear the suspense. "Sarah and Thomas. I should have told you in my letters, but I feared." "I apologize for the deception, Mr. Daniels." The silence that followed seemed eternal. Matthew Daniels removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with touches of silver at the temples. His eyes, a clear, startling blue, studied each of them carefully. "You brought children," he finally said, his voice measured. "Yes," Fiona replied, lifting her chin slightly. "If this changes your mind about our arrangement, I understand completely, but I couldn't leave them behind." Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her small purse. "I can pay for our passage back east, though we may need to wait until the next. I always wanted a big family." The words stopped her cold. Fiona blinked, certain she had misheard. Matthew Daniels crouched down to eye level with the children, his movements careful and deliberate as if approaching skittish colts. "Hello there," he said softly. "My name is Matthew. I have a ranch with horses and cattle. Would you like to see it?" Sarah, ever bold, stepped forward slightly. "Do you have chickens too?" A smile broke across Matthew's face, transforming his serious countenance. "I do indeed, and they need someone to help collect eggs in the mornings." Thomas remained silent, his small hand gripping Fiona's skirt. Matthew rose to his full height, meeting Fiona's astonished gaze. "Children are a blessing, Miss James. I meant what I said in my letters. My home is too empty, and this land is meant for family." He gestured toward the mountainous landscape beyond the town. "There's room for all of you if you're still willing." Relief washed over Fiona so suddenly that she feared her legs might give way. "You're not angry," surprised, he admitted, "but not angry. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and I've learned not to question the gifts He provides." He offered a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Shall we get you folks settled? It's a bit of a ride to the ranch, and you all look like you could use a good meal and rest." As Matthew loaded their trunk onto his own wagon, a sturdy, well-maintained vehicle that spoke of care and prosperity, Fiona studied him surreptitiously. He wasn't what she had expected. The letters had revealed a man of education and faith, but they hadn't captured the quiet strength he exuded or the gentleness in his hands as he helped Sarah climb aboard. "Your children are well behaved," he commented as they left town, the buildings of Calico receding behind them. "Thank you," Fiona replied, still disbelieving of her good fortune. "They've endured much these past 2 years." Matthew nodded, his gaze briefly meeting hers. "Loss changes us all. My own wife passed 5 years ago, influenza. We had no children." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, though Fiona could sense the old grief beneath his words. The landscape opened before them, rolling hills dotted with scrub brush giving way to grasslands that seemed to stretch endlessly. In the distance, a line of cottonwood trees suggested a creek or river, their green foliage a stark contrast to the arid surroundings. "That's Calico Creek," Matthew explained, noticing her interest. "It runs year-round, even in the driest summers. The ranch sits just beyond it." As they approached, Fiona could make out fenced pastures where cattle grazed, and beyond them, a substantial 2-story house painted white with green trim. A barn and several outbuildings flanked it, all well maintained. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and welcoming, far more than she had dared hope for. "Home," Matthew announced as they crossed a wooden bridge over the creek. "It's not fancy, but it's sturdy and keeps the weather out." "It's beautiful," Fiona said honestly, feeling Sarah and Thomas straighten beside her to get a better view. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on an apron. Gray-haired and plump, she waved enthusiastically. "That's Mrs. Abernathy," Matthew explained. "She comes from town 3 days a week to help with cooking and cleaning. She's been a godsend since my wife passed." The wagon pulled to a stop in the yard, and Mrs. Abernathy's eyes widened as she took in the sight of Fiona and the children. "Well, I'll be," she exclaimed. "Mr. Daniels, you didn't mention young ones." A happy surprise, Matthew replied with a smile as he helped them down. "Mrs. Abernathy, may I present Miss Fiona James and her children, Sarah and Thomas. Miss James has traveled all the way from St. Louis to be my wife. Oh, my stars, Mrs. Abernathy bustled forward to take Fiona's hands in her own. "Welcome, welcome. You must be exhausted, you poor dears. Come inside, I've got stew simmering and fresh bread just out of the oven." The interior of the house was as well kept as its exterior suggested. Simple but quality furnishings, clean floors and walls adorned with a few framed paintings and photographs. Through a doorway, Fiona glimpsed a parlor with actual bookshelves filled with volumes. "The kitchen's this way," Mrs. Abernathy guided them. "Let's get some food into you before you drop from hunger. Mr. Daniels, I'll need to prepare the second bedroom for the children. It's full of storage at present." "Of course," Matthew nodded. "I'll move those boxes to the attic after supper." As they entered the kitchen, a bright, airy room with a large table at its center, Fiona felt Thomas tug at her sleeve. She bent down, and he whispered in her ear for the first time in days, "Mama, I like it here." She blinked back sudden tears. "So do I, my love." Mrs. Abernathy proved to be a magnificent cook, and the hearty beef stew with fresh bread revived their spirits considerably. Even Thomas ate eagerly, a sight that warmed Fiona's heart. Throughout the meal, Matthew asked gentle questions about their journey and previous life, careful not to probe too deeply into painful memories. He spoke directly to the children as well, treating them with the same respect he showed to Fiona. "Tomorrow I'll show you the ranch," he told them. "We have horses that need exercising if you're interested in learning to ride." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Real horses. Papa only let me sit on the milkman's horse once, and it was very old." "Well, we have some gentle mares that would be perfect for beginning riders," Matthew assured her. "And Thomas, would you like to learn too?" The boy nodded solemnly, and Fiona felt another small miracle had occurred: 2 responses from her son in one day, after months of near silence. After dinner, Matthew excused himself to prepare the second bedroom, despite Mrs. Abernathy's protests that she could manage. Fiona insisted on helping with the dishes, grateful for a moment to speak privately with the older woman. "He seems a good man," she ventured as they worked side by side at the washing basin. Mrs. Abernathy smiled knowingly. "One of the best God ever made, Miss James. This town has its share of hard men, miners and drifters looking to make quick fortunes. Mr. Daniels is cut from different cloth, works hard, deals fair, helps neighbors without being asked." She lowered her voice. "Lost his Elizabeth in '70, and it nearly broke him. Threw himself into building this ranch afterward. Only in the last year has he seemed ready to live again." "I lost my husband to pneumonia," Fiona confided, "after working in a textile mill in poor conditions. We'd moved to St. Louis for better opportunities, but—" Mrs. Abernathy patted her hand. "No need to explain, dear. Life has its trials for all of us, but you've found a safe harbor here, mark my words." Later, after the children had been bathed and settled into their new room, a comfortable space with 2 small beds that Matthew had assembled with remarkable efficiency, Fiona found herself alone with her future husband in the parlor. The awkwardness she had feared descended upon them now that practical matters had been handled. "We should discuss our arrangement," Matthew said, gesturing for her to take a seat in one of 2 comfortable armchairs positioned near the unlit fireplace. "I know this is all very sudden." Fiona perched on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap. "Yes, Mr. Daniels. Matthew, please," he corrected gently. "We'll be married after all." "When do you wish to hold the ceremony?" Fiona asked, unable to keep a tremor from her voice. "There's a circuit preacher who comes through Calico every 3rd Sunday. He'll be here in 4 days. If that suits you." When she nodded, he continued, "In the meantime, I'll sleep in the bunkhouse with my ranch hands. I want you to be comfortable, and I understand you need time to adjust." Relief flooded through her. "That's very considerate. Miss James, Fiona, I want to be clear about something." Matthew leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I advertised for a wife because I desire companionship and, yes, help with running a growing ranch, but I don't expect blind obedience or wifely duties you're not ready for. I hope in time we might develop true affection, but I won't rush you." Fiona felt tears threatening again. After 2 years of struggling alone, of fearing for her children's future, this man's simple decency seemed almost too good to be true. "Thank you," she managed. I hope I can be a good wife to you. I have no doubts." His smile was warm. "And a wonderful mother you already are. Your children are a testament to that." That night, lying in Matthew's bed now temporarily hers, Fiona stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night. Crickets chirping, occasional lowing of cattle in the distance, the soft rustle of cottonwood leaves outside her window. So different from the crowded tenement in St. Louis, with its constant noise and smells. For the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps things would be all right. That perhaps this wasn't just another stop on a journey of hardship, but the beginning of something lasting. Something good. Dawn brought with it the sounds of a working ranch, voices calling to one another, the nickering of horses, a rooster crowing persistently. Fiona dressed quickly and found Mrs. Abernathy already preparing breakfast, the kitchen filled with the enticing aroma of coffee and frying bacon. "Good morning, dear." The older woman greeted her cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Fiona admitted, reaching for an apron. "Please let me help." Together they prepared a substantial breakfast. Shortly afterward, Sarah and Thomas appeared, their hair tousled from sleep but their eyes bright with the excitement of new surroundings. Matthew joined them moments later, bringing with him the fresh scent of morning air. "I hope I didn't wake you," he said, removing his hat. "Ranch work starts early." "Not at all," Fiona assured him. "We're early risers ourselves." Breakfast was a comfortable affair, with Matthew describing the day's activities and explaining aspects of ranch life to the children, who listened with rapt attention. When the meal was finished, he surprised Fiona by turning to her directly. "I thought you might like to see the property today," he suggested. "Get a feel for the place. Mrs. Abernathy has kindly offered to watch the children for an hour or two if that's acceptable." "Oh." Fiona glanced at Thomas and Sarah, who nodded eagerly at Mrs. Abernathy's mention of baking cookies. "Well, if it's no trouble." "None at all," the older woman assured her. "These young ones and I will get along famously." Minutes later, Fiona found herself seated beside Matthew in a smaller wagon, heading away from the house toward the pastures. The morning was gloriously clear, the sky an impossible blue stretched overhead. "The ranch is about 300 acres, Matthew explained as they drove. "Most of it grazing land for the cattle. We run about 200 head now, but I'm looking to expand next year if the market holds." "It's beautiful country," Fiona observed, taking in the sweeping grasslands broken by occasional stands of trees. "It is," he agreed. "Harsh sometimes, but honest. The land doesn't lie to you, it gives back what you put in." They passed several cowboys on horseback, who tipped their hats respectfully to Matthew and regarded Fiona with polite curiosity. "My crew," Matthew explained. "Good men, all of them. Been with me since I started building the herd." The tour continued to a hilltop that offered a panoramic view of the entire property. Matthew helped Fiona down from the wagon, and they stood side by side, surveying the land that stretched in all directions. When I first came to California, I was chasing gold like everyone else, Matthew confided, his gaze distant. Found enough to buy this land, but realized the real fortune was in building something lasting. Elizabeth and I had such plans. His voice trailed off momentarily before he collected himself. I'm sorry, I don't mean to burden you with old sorrows. Please don't apologize, Fiona said softly. She was your wife. Your love for her honors her memory. Matthew turned to look at her directly, something shifting in his expression. You're a remarkable woman, Fiona James, to have endured what you have and still have such grace. I could say the same of you, she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. A comfortable silence fell between them as they gazed out over the land. Finally, Matthew spoke again, his voice thoughtful. I want you to know that I meant what I said yesterday, about the children. I truly am glad you brought them, even though I wasn't truthful about them in my letters. Sometimes we protect what we love by whatever means necessary, he said simply. I understand that, and they're wonderful children. Sarah has your spirit, I can tell, and Thomas, he watches everything, doesn't he? Sees more than he says. He used to be quite talkative, Fiona admitted, pain lacing her words, before his father died. Now words seem to cost him dearly. Matthew nodded. Grief affects us all differently. My foreman, Diego, has a son about Thomas's age. Perhaps companionship with another boy might help draw him out. The consideration in this suggestion touched Fiona deeply. This man had known her children for less than a day, yet already he was thinking of their well-being. Thank you, she said, the words inadequate for the gratitude she felt, for giving us a chance. Thank you for being brave enough to come, he replied. Now, shall we head back? I promised Sarah a look at those chickens. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Fiona quickly familiarized herself with the workings of the household, grateful for Mrs. Abernathy's guidance and patience. The children adapted to their new surroundings with remarkable ease, Sarah following Matthew around whenever he was near the house, peppering him with endless questions that he answered with unfailing patience. Thomas remained more reserved, but each day brought small improvements. He ventured further from Fiona's side, exploring the barn under the watchful eye of Diego, the foreman, and developing a particular fondness for a gentle mare named Buttercup. On the third day, Matthew drove them into Calico to purchase supplies and introduce Fiona to some of the townspeople. The mining town was bustling with activity, its single street lined with saloons, boarding houses, and businesses catering to the miners and ranchers of the region. Mrs. Thompson runs the dress shop, Matthew explained as they walked along the boardwalk, pointing out a modest storefront. I took the liberty of arranging for you to meet with her. For a wedding dress, he added, a hint of color touching his cheeks. Fiona's hand flew to her mouth. But I couldn't possibly, please, he said gently. It would give me great pleasure to see you properly attired for our wedding. The children as well new clothes for everyone. The generosity of this gesture overwhelmed her. Her current dress, one of only two she owned, had been mended multiple times and was woefully outdated. Mrs. Thompson proved to be a friendly woman in her 50s who clapped her hands in delight when Fiona entered her shop. Mr. Daniels told me you were coming. Oh my, aren't you a vision? Such lovely coloring auburn hair is so distinguished. Over the next hour, Fiona was measured and fitted for a simple but elegant wedding dress of cream-colored silk with delicate lace trim. Mrs. Thompson worked with remarkable efficiency, promising that the dress would be ready by Sunday morning. Sarah, too, was fitted for a new dress of pale blue cotton, while Thomas received measurements for a proper suit. Your Matthew is well respected in these parts, Mrs. Thompson confided as she pinned the hem of the wedding dress. not just for his success with the ranch, but for his character. Many a struggling family has found a crate of supplies on their doorstep during hard times, always anonymously, but we all know where it comes from. This revelation didn't surprise Fiona, but it warmed her heart nonetheless. As they left the dress shop, Matthew escorted them to the general store, where he insisted on purchasing not just household necessities, but small luxuries as well: a porcelain doll for Sarah, a set of wooden toy soldiers for Thomas, and for Fiona, a beautiful leather-bound journal and pencils. "For your thoughts," he explained when she protested the extravagance. "Everyone needs a private place to reflect." As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, a commotion further down the street caught their attention. A man stumbled out of a saloon, clearly intoxicated, shouting obscenities at another patron who followed close behind. "Stay here," Matthew instructed, his voice suddenly firm. He strode toward the disturbance, his posture alert but not aggressive. Fiona watched as he spoke to the two men, his manner calm but authoritative. Whatever he said seemed to diffuse the tension, as the drunker of the two men eventually shrugged and staggered away, while the other nodded respectfully to Matthew before returning to the saloon. "Sheriff's out of town," Matthew explained upon his return. "Sometimes a neutral voice is all that's needed." The incident revealed yet another facet of the man she was about to marry: his standing in the community, the natural respect he commanded without resorting to threats or violence. It occurred to Fiona that in less than a week, this thoughtful, generous man would be her husband in truth, a realization that sent a flutter of nervousness through her stomach. That evening, after the children had been tucked into bed, Fiona found herself once again in the parlor with Matthew. This had become their nightly ritual, a quiet hour of conversation before he retired to the bunkhouse and she to the main bedroom. These conversations had gradually deepened, moving beyond practicalities to more personal exchanges. "May I ask about your husband?" Matthew inquired gently. "You needn't speak of it if it pains you too much." Fiona was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Frank was a good man, a dreamer, always convinced the next opportunity would be the one to secure our fortune. She smiled sadly. "We left our families in Pennsylvania to seek better prospects in St. Louis. The textile mill paid better than farming," he said. "And it did for a time, but the conditions. The air was filled with cotton fibers and the hours were long. His lungs were never strong to begin with." "I'm sorry," Matthew said softly. "The hardest part was watching him fade," Fiona continued, finding a strange relief in finally speaking these thoughts aloud. "Knowing there was nothing I could do. The children watched their father wither away and I couldn't protect them from that reality." "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for," Matthew observed, "and they had you to anchor them." "What about you?" Fiona asked, eager to shift the focus from herself. "How did you come to California?" Matthew settled back in his chair. "Like so many others, chasing gold and adventure. I was 22, full of ambition but short on sense. Met Elizabeth in San Francisco. She was a school teacher who'd come west with her brother. We married after a whirlwind courtship and headed inland, following rumors of new strikes." His expression softened with remembrance. "Elizabeth was the practical one. When I found a modest strike, she convinced me to invest in land rather than squander it on more prospecting. She was right, as usual. We built this place together bit by bit." "She sounds remarkable." "She was." Matthew smiled. "She would have liked you, I think. You have the same quiet strength." The compliment warmed Fiona unexpectedly. "I hope to be worthy of this home she helped create." "You already are," he assured her. "In just a few days, you've brought life back to this house in a way I'd forgotten was possible." Their gazes held for a moment longer than usual, and Fiona felt something shift between them, a tentative connection forming, delicate but promising. Sunday dawned clear and bright, with a gentle breeze that rustled the cottonwood leaves and carried the scent of wildflowers from the creek. Fiona stood before the small mirror in the bedroom, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back at her. Mrs. Thompson's cream silk dress fit perfectly, accentuating her slender figure while maintaining appropriate modesty. Mrs. Abernathy had arranged Fiona's auburn hair in an elegant style, weaving small white flowers through the braided crown. "You look like an angel, Mama," Sarah declared from the doorway, resplendent in her new blue dress. "As do you, my darling," Fiona smiled, extending her arms to her daughter. "Is your brother ready? Thomas is with Mr. Daniels. He's teaching him how to tie a proper necktie." Sarah bounced on her toes with excitement. There are so many people outside already. It seemed that much of Calico had turned out for the wedding. The ceremony would take place under the cottonwood trees near the creek, followed by a celebration at the ranch house. Fiona had been astonished by the community's response to the wedding announcement. Neighbors she hadn't yet met arriving with food, flowers, and offers of help. "It's time, dear," Mrs. Abernathy appeared, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Everyone's waiting." With her children at her side, Fiona made the short walk from the house to the makeshift altar beneath the largest cottonwood. Lanterns hung from the lower branches, though they were unnecessary in the bright morning sun. Benches had been arranged in rows, and they were filled with ranchers, townspeople, and the entire crew of the Daniels Ranch. And there, waiting beside the circuit preacher, stood Matthew. He had trimmed his beard and wore a new black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. When he turned and saw her approaching, the expression that crossed his face made Fiona's heart skip wonder, admiration, and something deeper that she wasn't yet ready to name. Thomas solemnly took his place beside Diego and his son in the front row, while Sarah remained at Fiona's side, serving as her attendant. As Fiona reached the altar, Matthew extended his hand to her, his touch warm and reassuring. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice carrying across the assembled guests, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony itself passed in a blur for Fiona, though she clearly remembered the earnestness in Matthew's voice as he recited his vows, and the gentle way he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother. He'd told her the night before. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "Mr. Daniels, you may kiss your bride." Matthew leaned forward, his eyes seeking permission. Fiona gave a slight nod, and his lips met hers in a brief, tender kiss that nevertheless sent warmth spreading through her entire body. The celebration that followed was joyous and relaxed. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food contributed by neighbors and prepared by Mrs. Abernathy. Music filled the air as several ranch hands revealed themselves to be talented musicians, playing fiddles and guitars while people danced and children ran laughing through the grass. "Mrs. Daniels," Matthew appeared at her side, offering a glass of lemonade. "How does it feel?" "Strange," she admitted with a smile, "but not unpleasant." "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a folded document and handed it to her. Curiously, Fiona opened it, her eyes widening as she read. "This is a deed to the ranch," Matthew confirmed, "with your name added alongside mine. What's mine is now yours in legal fact as well as promise." Tears sprang to Fiona's eyes. After years of uncertainty and dependence, this gesture of security and trust overwhelmed her. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me make this ranch prosper," Matthew replied. "Say you'll make this house a home again." "I will," she whispered, "With all my heart." As twilight fell, the guests gradually departed, offering congratulations and well wishes. Mrs. Abernathy, who had been a pillar of support throughout the day, hugged Fiona tightly before leaving. "I'll be back Tuesday as usual," she promised. "But you newlyweds deserve some privacy to settle in properly." This reminder of what was to come sent a flutter of nervous anticipation through Fiona's stomach. She had been a wife before, but this was different, a marriage begun in practicality rather than passion, though something was certainly growing between them. After putting the exhausted children to bed, Fiona found herself once again in the parlor with Matthew. The house seemed unusually quiet after the day's festivities. "Would you like some tea?" she offered, seeking refuge in domesticity. "In a moment," Matthew replied, gesturing for her to join him on the settee. When she sat beside him, he took her hand gently in his. "Fiona, I want you to know that nothing changes tonight if you're not ready. We may be married by law, but trust takes time to build." The consideration in this offer touched her deeply. "You're a good man, Matthew Daniels." "I'm trying to be," he said simply. "You've entrusted me with yourself and your children. That's a responsibility I take seriously." Fiona studied their joined hands, his large and work-roughened, hers smaller but also bearing the marks of labor. In that moment, she made a decision. "I would like to be a true wife to you," she said softly. "Not out of obligation, but because I see the man you are. Because I want to build something real with you." The look that crossed Matthew's face was one of profound gratitude. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then we'll build it together, day by day." Later, in the privacy of what was now their shared bedroom, Fiona discovered that Matthew's gentleness extended to the most intimate aspects of marriage. His touches were reverent, his patience infinite as they learned each other in the soft glow of lamplight. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, Fiona felt the first stirrings of something she had not dared hope for in this arrangement, not just security or companionship, but the beginnings of love. As summer gave way to autumn, the Daniels Ranch settled into a rhythm of prosperity and domestic harmony. Fiona took to ranch life with a determination that impressed even the most seasoned cowboys. She learned to manage the household accounts, implemented new efficiencies in the kitchen garden, and even began assisting with the ranch's correspondence and record-keeping, revealing a head for figures that Matthew greatly appreciated. The children, too, flourished in their new environment. Sarah became the unofficial assistant to Diego's wife, Carmen, who taught the girl to make tortillas and traditional Mexican dishes that soon became family favorites. Thomas, meanwhile, gradually emerged from his shell. The turning point came when Matthew entrusted him with the care of a newborn calf, whose mother had died, a responsibility the boy took to with solemn dedication. Within a month, Thomas was speaking regularly again, his sentences growing longer and his smile appearing more frequently. One crisp October evening, as Fiona sat on the porch darning socks, Matthew joined her, settling into the adjacent rocking chair with a contented sigh. "I received good news today," he announced. "The cattle sale in San Francisco exceeded expectations. We'll be able to purchase that additional acreage to the north before winter sets in." "That's wonderful," Fiona smiled. "Your hard work is paying off." "Our hard work," he corrected gently. "This success belongs to all of us." "Which reminds me," he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I've been saving this for the right moment." Curious, Fiona set aside her darning and accepted the pouch. Inside, she found a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "It's beautiful," she breathed, opening it to find empty frames inside. "I thought we might get photographs taken next time we're in San Bernardino," Matthew explained. One of the children for one side and perhaps us for the other. The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Fiona's eyes. I would like that very much. Matthew leaned over to help her fasten the locket around her neck, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin there. Even after months of marriage, his touch still sent a pleasant shiver through her body. "There's something else," he said, settling back in his chair. "Carmen mentioned you haven't been feeling well in the mornings. Is everything all right?" Fiona's hands stilled in her lap. She had been waiting for the right moment to share her suspicions, wanting to be certain before raising hopes. "I believe I might be with child," she said softly. "It's early yet, but the signs are there." Matthew went completely still, his expression one of stunned wonder. "A baby, our baby," Fiona nodded, suddenly anxious. "Are you pleased?" "I know it's soon, perhaps," and with the ranch expanding, her words were cut off as Matthew knelt before her chair, gathering her hands in his. "Please doesn't begin to describe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Fiona, you've already given me more happiness than I thought possible by bringing yourself and your children into my life. A new baby." He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. "I'm a little frightened," she admitted. "Childbirth is never without risk, and out here, so far from proper doctors, we'll bring in the best midwife in the territory," Matthew assured her. "And if necessary, I'll take you to San Bernardino where there's a proper hospital. No expense will be spared for your comfort and safety." The vehemence in his declaration warmed her heart. "Then I shall look forward to giving you a son or daughter with joy rather than fear." Matthew raised her hands to his lips, kissing them reverently. "I love you, Fiona Daniels." I know it began as an arrangement of convenience, but somewhere along the way, my heart decided otherwise. It was the first time he had spoken those words aloud, though his actions had been declaring it for months. Tears of happiness spilled down Fiona's cheeks as she leaned forward to cup his bearded face in her hands. "And I love you, Matthew Daniels, with all that I am." Their kiss sealed this declaration, sweet and unhurried in the fading light of day. The news of the coming baby was received with jubilation by the children. Sarah immediately began planning how she would help care for her new sibling, while Thomas solemnly promised to teach the baby everything he knew about cattle and horses when they were old enough. As Fiona's pregnancy progressed, the ranch continued to prosper. The additional acreage was purchased and fenced before the first winter storms arrived. Matthew hired 2 more hands to help with the expanded operation, and built a small schoolhouse on the property where a retired teacher from Calico came 3 times a week to instruct not just Sarah and Thomas, but also the children of Diego and other ranch employees. Winter in the California high desert brought cold nights, but generally mild days. The Christmas season found the Daniels' home decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, the air filled with the scents of cinnamon and ginger as Fiona and Carmen prepared traditional holiday treats. On Christmas Eve, neighbors from miles around gathered for a celebration that lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army. As the guests departed, and the children were finally coaxed to bed with promises that Santa would come only after they were asleep, Matthew found Fiona by the fireplace in the parlor, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. "Happy?" he asked, settling beside her on the settee. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied honestly. "A year ago, I was facing eviction from our rooms in St. Louis, wondering how I would feed the children through another winter. And now you're stuck with a stubborn rancher who can't believe his good fortune," Matthew teased, drawing her close against his side. "The very best kind of fortune," Fiona assured him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember what you said when you first saw the children?" That day in Calico, Matthew smiled at the memory. "I always wanted a big family," he quoted himself. "Little did I know how quickly that wish would be granted." "You saved us," Fiona said softly. "Not just from poverty, but from despair. You gave us hope again." "And you brought life back to this valley," Matthew countered. "To this house. To me." He placed his hand over hers on her growing belly. "Our family is a miracle I thank God for every day." Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers across the ranch lands. Fiona, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, moved more slowly but remained determined to keep up with her household duties, despite Matthew's gentle insistence that she rest more. "The baby will be here soon enough," he reminded her one afternoon as he found her hanging laundry. "Mrs. Abernathy is perfectly capable of managing these chores." "I'm pregnant, not invalid," Fiona retorted, though she allowed him to take the heavy basket from her hands. "Besides, the fresh air does me good." Matthew shook his head with a fond smile. "Stubborn woman." "You wouldn't have me any other way," she challenged, rising on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. "No," he agreed softly. "I wouldn't." That night, Fiona awoke to a sharp pain and the unmistakable sensation of wetness soaking the bedsheets. "Matthew," she gasped, clutching his arm, "the baby, it's coming." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and determination. Matthew sent one of the ranch hands racing to fetch the midwife from Calico, while Mrs. Abernathy, who had been staying in the guest room in anticipation of this moment, took charge of the birthing preparations with calm efficiency. The children were shuttled to Diego and Carmen's cabin, despite their protests at being excluded from such an important family event. By dawn, Fiona's labor was well established, her cries occasionally piercing the early morning quiet of the ranch house. Matthew refused to be banished from the room as was customary, insisting on staying by his wife's side despite the midwife's initial objections. "I'll not have her face this alone," he declared with quiet authority, taking his place at the head of the bed where he could wipe Fiona's brow and murmur encouragement as she battled through each contraction. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Fiona's strength began to wane. "I can't," she gasped after a particularly brutal contraction. "Matthew, I can't do this." "You can," he assured her, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "You're the strongest person I know, Fiona Daniels. Our child is almost here, just a little longer." Drawing strength from his unwavering faith, Fiona gathered her remaining energy for the final push. With a cry that seemed torn from her very soul, she brought their child into the world, a robust boy with a shock of dark hair and a lusty wail that immediately filled the room. "A son," the midwife announced, quickly cleaning and swaddling the infant before placing him in Fiona's trembling arms. "A fine, healthy son." Fiona gazed down at the tiny, perfect face, tears of exhaustion and joy streaming down her cheeks. "Look what we've made, Matthew." Matthew's own eyes were wet as he leaned close, one finger gently tracing the baby's downy cheek. "He's magnificent," he whispered, "just like his mother." They named him William James Daniels in honor of both Matthew's father and Fiona's maiden name. Will, as they immediately began calling him, proved to be a peaceful baby with his father's blue eyes and a temperament that alternated between observant calm and determined vigor. Sarah and Thomas were enchanted with their new brother, vying for the privilege of holding him and competing to make him smile once he was old enough to do so. Thomas, in particular, took his role as older brother seriously, solemnly explaining ranch operations to the infant as if Will could understand every word. By Will's first birthday, the Daniels Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in San Bernardino County. The herd had doubled in size, requiring the addition of more cowboys and the construction of a second bunkhouse. A proper schoolhouse now stood near the main house, serving not just the Daniels' children but those from neighboring ranches as well. The celebration of Will's birthday coincided with the anniversary of Fiona and Matthew's wedding. After the guests had departed and the children were asleep, the couple sat together on the porch swing that Matthew had built the previous summer, watching as twilight descended over their land. "I have something for you," Matthew said, reaching into his pocket. "A small token of my gratitude for the joy you've brought to my life this past year." He placed in her palm a delicately crafted silver charm in the shape of a heart. Engraved on one side were their initials, and on the other, the initials of all three children. "It's beautiful," Fiona breathed, running her finger over the intricate engraving. "I had it made to fit on the chain with your locket," Matthew explained. "That way, you carry all our hearts with you always." As he helped her add the charm to her necklace, Fiona was struck by how completely her life had transformed. From a desperate widow facing an uncertain future to a beloved wife and mother, secure in both home and heart. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been honest in my letters," she mused. "If I'd told you about the children from the beginning." Matthew considered this, his arm drawing her closer against the evening chill. "Perhaps I would have hesitated, not knowing if I was ready for an instant family." His smile was soft in the gathering dusk. "But I like to think that God knew better than both of us what we needed. That He guided you to keep that secret until we met face to face, so that I could see those children and fall in love with all three of you at once." "Such a philosopher," Fiona teased, leaning her head against his shoulder. "But I think you're right. Some things are meant to be, despite our fears and hesitations." "Speaking of which," Matthew's voice took on a note of careful neutrality that immediately caught Fiona's attention. "Mrs. Abernathy mentioned you were feeling unwell again in the mornings, similar to last year." Fiona's smile widened as she took his hand and placed it over her still flat stomach. "It seems our family is destined to grow again. I suspect this little one will join us around Christmas." The joy that spread across Matthew's face was answer enough, but he gathered her close nonetheless, his kiss conveying everything words could not. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, he rested his forehead against hers. "I always wanted a big family," he whispered, repeating the words that had changed both their lives that fateful day in Calico. "And thanks to you, I have been blessed beyond measure." Under a canopy of stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky, Fiona Daniels offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had led her to this place, this man, this life. What had begun as a desperate gamble born of necessity had blossomed into the deepest love she had ever known, a love that continued to grow with each passing season, each new challenge faced together, each addition to their family. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Fiona found herself reflecting on the upcoming birth of their second child while watching Thomas and Sarah ride their ponies in the corral near the house. Will sat on her lap, contentedly chewing on a wooden teething ring, his dark curls catching the afternoon sunlight. "They've grown so much," Matthew observed, joining her on the porch bench. "Thomas is becoming quite the horseman." It was true. At 7, Thomas had overcome his early reticence and now moved with quiet confidence around the ranch. Sarah, at 9, had developed into a spirited girl with a natural talent for numbers that had proven useful in the ranch's bookkeeping simple tasks that Fiona now allowed her to assist with as a learning opportunity. "Time passes so quickly," Fiona agreed, adjusting Will on her lap as he squirmed to get a better view of his siblings. "It seems like only yesterday they were frightened children arriving in a strange place. And now they're proper ranch kids," Matthew smiled, his pride evident. Diego says Thomas has a natural way with the cattle, better than some grown men he's worked with. The mention of Diego reminded Fiona of news she'd heard that morning. Carmen told me they're expecting again. Their fourth. That's wonderful news, Matthew nodded. I'll speak to Diego about adding on to their cabin before winter sets in. He glanced at Fiona's expanding belly. Perhaps we should be thinking about our own accommodations as well. The house isn't exactly cramped yet, but with another little one on the way. Are you suggesting we build an addition? Fiona asked, intrigued by the idea. I've been thinking about it for a while, Matthew admitted. Another bedroom at least, perhaps a larger kitchen. This place was built for a childless couple, not a growing family. The thoughtfulness of his planning touched Fiona deeply. It was so characteristic of Matthew to think ahead, to ensure that every member of his household, family, and employees alike had what they needed to thrive. I think that's a wonderful idea, she agreed. Though perhaps we should wait until after the baby arrives, one major undertaking at a time. Matthew chuckled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. Always the voice of reason, Mrs. Daniels. Very well, we'll revisit the idea in the spring. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a rider coming up the road to the ranch house. As the figure drew closer, they recognized Henry Wilson, one of the newer ranchers in the area who had settled about 10 miles to the east the previous year. Matthew. Wilson called, dismounting with an urgency that immediately put them both on alert. Sorry to disturb your family time, but we've got trouble brewing. Matthew stood, his expression shifting to one of concern. What kind of trouble, Henry? Wilson removed his hat, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. Railroad surveyors. They're marking a route that cuts right through the eastern grazing lands, mine and yours both, from what I can tell. Fiona felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. The coming of the railroad had been a topic of discussion for months, but most had assumed the route would follow the pass further north. Have you spoken to them? Matthew asked, his voice measured. Tried to, Wilson grimaced. Got a lot of talk about progress and eminent domain. Said they've got government backing and we'd be hearing from their lawyers soon enough. Matthew's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm. I see. Are they still out there? Left about an hour ago, heading back toward Calico. Said they'd be back tomorrow to continue their survey. Thank you for the warning, Henry. Matthew clapped the man on the shoulder. Stay for supper. We should discuss this further. As Wilson gratefully accepted, Fiona caught Matthew's eye, reading the concern there despite his outward composure. The railroad could be either a blessing or a curse for ranchers like them, bringing better access to markets, but also potentially dividing grazing lands and disrupting cattle operations. Over supper, the men discussed strategies while Fiona listened attentively, occasionally offering insights that both men considered seriously. By the time Wilson departed, a plan had been formed to gather the other affected ranchers for a meeting the following evening. Later, after the children were asleep, Fiona found Matthew in his study, poring over the ranch's property maps by lamplight. How bad could it be? She asked softly, placing a cup of coffee beside him. Matthew sighed, leaning back in his chair. If they take the route Wilson described, it would cut off nearly a quarter of our best grazing land. We could work around it, but it wouldn't be ideal. Is there anything we can do legally? Perhaps. I'll ride into San Bernardino tomorrow to consult with Judge Parker. He's dealt with the railroads before. Matthew reached for her hand, drawing her down to sit on his lap despite her protesting laugh about her increasing size. Don't worry too much, my love. We've faced challenges before. And overcome them together, Fiona finished, resting her head against his shoulder. The railroad dispute consumed much of their attention over the next weeks. Matthew formed an alliance with neighboring ranchers to present a unified front, while Fiona kept the ranch running smoothly in his frequent absence. Her condition made long journeys inadvisable, but she managed the day-to-day operations with characteristic efficiency, earning even greater respect from the ranch hands. By late November, a compromise had been reached. The railroad would adjust its route to follow the natural contours of the land more closely, minimizing the impact on the ranches while still providing access to Calico and the surrounding communities. In exchange, the ranchers agreed to grant easements and sell small parcels for necessary stations and water towers at fair market prices. "It's not perfect," Matthew admitted as they celebrated the agreement with a special family dinner, "but it's a solution we can all live with. And the railroad will bring opportunities to faster shipping for our cattle, better access to supplies. I'm just glad it's resolved before the baby arrives," Fiona said, one hand resting on her prominent belly. "One less worry on our minds." As if in agreement, the baby delivered a swift kick that made Fiona gasp and then laugh. "This one is already more active than Will ever was," she commented. "Perhaps we're in for a daughter with Sarah's spirit this time." "Heaven help us if that's true," Matthew teased, earning a playful swat from his stepdaughter. The first snowfall of the season arrived in early December, dusting the ranch with a delicate white coating that delighted the children. Thomas and Sarah spent hours building snow forts and engaging the ranch hands in good-natured snowball fights, while Will toddled after them, bundled so thoroughly in winter clothing that he resembled a small, mobile ball of wool. As Christmas approached, Fiona's time grew near. The midwife had taken up residence in the guest room, and Carmen came daily to help with household tasks and the children. Matthew rarely strayed far from the house, delegating ranch responsibilities to Diego so that he could remain close at hand. On the evening of December 23rd, as the family sat in the parlor stringing popcorn for the Christmas tree, Fiona felt the first telltale tightening across her abdomen. She met Matthew's watchful gaze across the room and gave a slight nod. His eyes widened momentarily before he composed himself, not wanting to alarm the children. "I think it's about bedtime for certain young ranch hands," he announced casually. "Tomorrow's Christmas Eve, and we have much to prepare." After settling the children with promises of exciting holiday activities the next day, Matthew returned to find Fiona breathing slowly through a contraction while the midwife and Carmen prepared the bedroom. "How are you feeling?" he asked, taking her hands in his. "Ready to meet our Christmas baby," Fiona replied with a brave smile. "Though I suspect this one might be a bit more stubborn than Will was." Her prediction proved accurate. Throughout the night and into the following day, Fiona labored with determination, the contractions coming in waves that seemed to build in intensity, but without the progress the midwife hoped to see. By late afternoon on Christmas Eve, concern had begun to shadow Matthew's features as he wiped Fiona's perspiring brow with a cool cloth. "Is this normal?" he murmured to the midwife when Fiona dozed briefly between contractions. "Every birth has its own rhythm," the older woman replied, though her own expression betrayed some worry. "But it might be wise to send for the doctor from San Bernardino, just to be safe." Matthew immediately dispatched his fastest rider, though they all knew the doctor wouldn't arrive for hours yet, given the distance and winter roads. As twilight approached, Fiona's strength began to flag noticeably. "Matthew," she whispered during a brief respite from pain, "if something happens, nothing is going to happen," he interrupted firmly, his voice betraying more confidence than he felt. "You and this baby are going to be fine. I won't accept any other outcome." A ghost of a smile touched Fiona's pale lips. "So stubborn," she murmured before another contraction took hold, this one drawing a cry of pain that she couldn't suppress. The midwife checked her progress again and straightened with renewed determination. "Mrs. Daniels, on the next contraction, I need you to push with everything you have. The baby has finally moved into position." Matthew supported Fiona's shoulders as she gathered her remaining strength. With a tremendous effort that seemed to come from some deep reserve she hadn't known she possessed, Fiona pushed as the next contraction built and peaked. "That's it," the midwife encouraged. "I can see the head. One more push should do it." With a final Herculean effort and a cry that seemed to echo through the entire house, Fiona delivered their child into the midwife's waiting hands. "A girl," the woman announced triumphantly. "A beautiful little girl." The infant's indignant wail filled the room, strong and healthy despite the long labor. Tears streamed down Matthew's face as he pressed his lips to Fiona's temple, his emotions too powerful for words. When the midwife placed the swaddled newborn in Fiona's arms, the exhaustion that had marked her features seemed to melt away, replaced by wonder and love. "She's perfect," she whispered, tracing a finger along the baby's pink cheek. "Just like her mother," Matthew said hoarsely, overcome by the sight of his wife and daughter. "Our Christmas miracle." They named her Grace, Elizabeth Daniels Grace, for the blessing she represented, and Elizabeth in honor of Matthew's first wife, a gesture that moved him to speechless gratitude when Fiona suggested it. The children were allowed to meet their new sister on Christmas morning, their excitement over Santa's gifts temporarily forgotten in the wonder of the tiny new addition to their family. Sarah immediately appointed herself assistant caretaker, while Thomas solemnly promised to teach Grace to ride horses when she was big enough, just as he had vowed to do for Will. As the family gathered around Fiona's bed, the Christmas morning sunlight streaming through the window and illuminating their faces, Matthew surveyed the scene with a heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such happiness. "What are you thinking?" Fiona asked softly, noticing his expression as he cradled Grace in his arms. Matthew smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I was thinking about that day in Calico, when a travel-worn woman and 2 children stepped off a wagon and changed my life forever." He leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. "When I said I always wanted a big family, I never imagined how completely that wish would be fulfilled or how much love my heart could hold." Fiona reached up to touch his cheek, her own eyes shining with happy tears. "From desperate beginnings to this abundance of blessings," she mused. "We've come so far together. And we have so much further yet to go," Matthew added, gazing down at the infant in his arms. "Our story is just beginning." As if in agreement, Grace opened her eyes blue like her father's, and seemed to study his face with solemn concentration before her tiny mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, blanketing the Daniels ranch in pristine white, a clean page upon which the next chapter of their family's story would be written. Within the warm sanctuary of their home, surrounded by the children who had brought them together and the new life they had created, Fiona and Matthew exchanged a look of profound understanding and gratitude. What had begun as a practical arrangement between strangers had blossomed into a love story. Neither could have imagined one that would continue to unfold in the years ahead, marked by challenges overcome together and joys multiplied by sharing. From a mail-order bride with 2 children to a family bound by love rather than obligation, their journey had only just begun. And in the heart of the California wilderness, the Daniels Ranch stood as testament to what courage, compassion, and Faith could build a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come.